Hi, my name is Anthony Bowles from Anthony Bowles Architecture Limited. Thanks for watching this video. It is part of a series explaining what initial surveys you may need to get your forthcoming construction project started. This is video 5 in the series and it is on heritage surveys. Let's firstly just take a quick look at the overall survey set to recap. Here is the full list. I won't read through it line by line though, so please just press pause if you would like to take more time to go through it yourself. Next up is a review of what information you can find from an initial heritage survey. Depending on the property and the project, it may be appropriate to do a quick desktop study on the building's history. For example, at its most basic, this might begin by checking whether or not the property is listed. If it is, then a quick look online at the Historic England Register should help identify what additional information is available publicly in terms of what the protected characteristics might be. In other words, what specific attributes are deemed to be of historical importance. And sometimes this can be a social history issue. For example, a particular person lived there, rather than the building itself being important physical fabric somehow. Here is a quick example for you on the Historic England website. For the sake of simplicity, let's take a modest listed building in London, St Paul's Cathedral. So here you can see we're on the Historic England website and we are searching the list. So just down here in the search bar, you add the address, the name of the place you're looking for, hit search. So turns out there are quite a few St Paul's cathedrals, but a few entries anyway. So you scroll down, here it is, the top entry here. And to begin with, it gives you an overview, tells you what grade the building is, gives you the list entry number when it was listed, location, and it should bring up a map which shows you where other adjacent listed buildings are. And then if you go back up to the top, you can go to the official list entry. And here it will say more about, okay, so it gives you a grid reference. And then down here, it gives you a description. And these would be the protected characteristics. So in this case, obviously, it's a Christopher Wren Cathedral, medieval cathedral burned in the Great Fire, classical style, mainly Portland stone, central dome, western towers, large crypt, etc., etc., etc. Obviously, there's quite a lot in this particular entry because it's a building of national significance, but the same would be true if we had searched for a grade 2 listed townhouse that was much more modest. It would still have this information, but it might be that the protected characteristics are a symmetrical Georgian facade, a piece of ornate railing on the front, something like that. So there you go. That is a quick look at the official list entry system on the Historic England website. There are, in fact, over 370,000 entries for listed buildings in England. 92% of these are Grade 2, which are characterised as being of special interest. Grade 2 star buildings account for around 6% of the list and are ranked as being of particularly important buildings of more than special interest. And the remaining 2% of buildings are Grade 1, and these are described as being of exceptional interest. Next, in terms of how your initial desktop heritage survey might progress, here is a look at an amazing website called Know Your Place. Again, for the sake of simplicity, let's take a look at another modest building, Salisbury Cathedral. Here we are. You can see I have navigated on the map to Salisbury Cathedral as the general area, so the centre of the map. And you can see how I can slide this window pane here left and right. On the right in the menus, you can see we have the main map and the OS map is highlighted. So this is the most up-to-date information. And then comparison maps, you can see all these different ones are available. And we have the 1844 OS 25-inch first edition selected. So if I then just hide that and slide this window across, you will see how it overlays the older map onto the new OS map. And this is just a fantastic resource if you're trying to understand how your site developed over time. You can see there lots of things appearing and disappearing. So unfortunately, this isn't a fully national website, but for the counties that it is available in, it's incredibly useful. And it's a really good starting point for understanding the chronology of your site. Returning now to the concept of listing, typically one important factor to keep in mind is that when a property is listed, the whole property comes under the listing, not just the bit that perhaps looks the oldest or is listed as a protected characteristic. This also applies to built elements that are not even attached to the main building. For example, the protection of the listing would include anything established to be the curtilage, which basically means any garden walls, any fences or paths, any outbuildings, etc. That is the initial assumption anyway. It can be refined down in some cases, usually by direct discussion with the heritage team of the relevant local authority. What this means is that you can't assume that you don't need to apply for listed buildings consent for some works just because they don't relate to the oldest part of a property or to a part of the main dwelling. Unless it has been made clear explicitly somewhere in the listing, which is rare, when a property is listed, the whole property is covered, and I can't stress this highly enough. If your property is of even limited heritage value, there is a high likelihood that any forthcoming planning application, listed building consent or otherwise, would need to include a heritage impact assessment, which pretty much does what it says on the tin. In other words, it's a report to hopefully demonstrate that the proposed works are appropriately sensitive and proportional to any historic context, that they do no harm, or even better, that they may actually represent a heritage gain, either in terms of the building itself or of any conservation area it may be within. This kind of document is something that ABA can often do in-house. However, if the property or context is particularly sensitive, it may well be worth bringing in a heritage consultant who will do a very much more detailed assessment of the fabric of the building or of the nature of the conservation area, and then may well also be part of the design process in terms of informing on what may or may not be appropriate to the heritage risks identified. Assuming the heritage consultant is then satisfied by the proposals and the way they relate to the historic context, they should then be able to go on to write a heritage impact assessment of their own, which reflects their findings and recommendations. This kind of more detailed report would arguably carry more weight in the planning process than one written in-house by ABA, but its usefulness is obviously proportional to the heritage risk versus the additional cost. At ABA, we like to work with someone called Michael Heaton, who among other things is qualified in archaeological science, building conservation, building surveying and architectural history, and is a member of the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists. Let's take a look at a couple of extracts from one of his reports. This first page is a series of drawings that explains the chronology of a Grade 2 listed townhouse by looking at evidence either visible in the built fabric or in archive material. This can be really useful when trying to understand the significance of previous extensions, for example. This second page is a table designed by Mike and for which he has a copyright, which looks to standardize the scale of a proposed intervention against the sensitivity of a building element and link these concepts to a specific language in planning law. This creates a really workable, translatable matrix of information against which the relative pros and cons of proposals can be assessed. Okay, I hope that gives you a reasonable idea of the initial heritage-related process that may be a part of your construction project journey. The next topic in this survey series is ecology. In the meantime, please let me know if you have any questions, comments, or feedback. My email address will appear at the end of this video. Many thanks for watching.